I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today I'm joined by Mr. Damian Bloss. He is very passionate about advocating for mental health awareness and addiction recovery. Through his experiences, he's learned valuable lessons about resilience, love, and the power of support and recovery. He's passionate about sharing his story in the hopes of inspiring others, whether they're personally in recovery or supporting a loved one through the journey. From the raw truths of addiction to the steps toward healing, he's here to provide insight, hope, and practical advice for anyone navigating this challenging yet rewarding journey. So I'd like to give a huge welcome to Damien. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks. No, I appreciate you having me on.
So if you could just share your story and just tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. So basically, I grew up, I'm what they called a late bloomer, if you will, in this. I did not start, pretty much self-destructing until I was about 18, 19 years old. Prior to that, growing up, it was a normal childhood I had. About 8 or 9 years old, my parents divorced, which wasn't, horrible or anything. And I grew up playing baseball. That was my everything when I was younger. And even though my parents were divorced, I still saw both of them at the equal amount of time. My dad was my baseball coach, so I grew up with him always there at my baseball games and things like that. So besides them getting divorced, everything else was pretty normal. My family was very close growing up. And at about 18, 19 years old, it was, a close family member of ours had passed away. And it was not so much the fact that he passed away, but the way it happened. He died by suicide, and I was very young. I didn't know. I'd never experienced something like that. That was always something you always heard about, other people happening to them or in movies and things like that. So it never struck me until it hit home. And that's when my self-destruction basically started. I was the only one that he had ever told that he wanted to do this, but being the age that I was, it was always like he would say, "I'm just joking. Don't tell anybody. It's just a joke. I'm not going to do that." And so I would brush it off and laugh about it like we would, until he actually did do it. And I'm left here and like I had this information this whole time, and I could have done something. What if I would have said something? And what if I would have went against his wishes and told it people? And, all these thoughts running through my head. And, at that time, I just felt guilty. Our family had never experienced something like this, so we weren't equipped to handle it. They were like not knowing how to go about it, and blaming other people and things like that, and just because they were so distraught. And so I was like, I heard all that, and there was no way I was telling somebody. After that, I did not want to be blamed, so I held that in for a good 20 years. And that's how long I was in active addiction as well.
So, can you describe the moment or experience that marked the turning point in your recovery?
Sure. It was, I had always wanted to get sober. I knew I had a problem, but I just wasn't physically and mentally ready, I don't think, to go through with it. I always wanted to stop living the way I was because, in all honesty, nobody wants to live like that. So I had tried so many times and it just did not work. And the turning point when I actually said, this has got to be it, was about 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago now, when I too was at the point to where I just did not want to deal with, you know, being here anymore. And I had been to jail, little stints in jail, and I had been to rehabs before and did the outpatient, the inpatient, and counseling and everything. And this disease was telling me, look, this is going to be your only way out. You're going to have to take yourself out. And at that point is when I realized like something is not right. Like I would never have had these thoughts in my sober mind. Something clicked in my head that I needed to do something about it. There was no way that I was made to end right there. So when I had that thought, I was in the process of letting my wife know, hey, I'm not going to be able to pick up the kids because I'm not going to be here. It was an accidental phone call that it saved my life pretty much. In the process of me texting her and telling her, look, I'm not going to be able to do that, I accidentally called this pastor I had in my phone. I had never talked to him before. My dad gave me his number at one point and was like, hey, you should call him. Maybe he can help you get out of this rut that you're in. And, my dad didn't know. He was just pulling at he was reaching for any way possible to get me help. And so I told him, I was like, yeah, I'll take the number and I'll give him a call. And I never did until that day. It was an accidental phone call. When I accidentally called him, I see my phone lit up and it's ringing. I totally froze. I didn't know what to do. And this guy answered. And, I completely broke down to him at that point. And I was like, I need to meet you. Something needs to happen. And he met me. We went to a little coffee shop down the road. And, we sat in this coffee shop. And it was at that point he asked me to pray. And, I'd never prayed before, ever in my life. And my relationship with God was just that he existed and I knew he did. That was it. I never went to church. I didn't believe in all that because I was always like, if he's, why isn't he helping me? Why me? Why is he letting me go down this road and things? Like I had a bad relationship with God. And at that point, when I prayed, it was definitely something that hit me. And I went home after our little meeting and I contacted this rehab down the road from me called Ashley Treatment Center. And I checked myself in. I was able to then text my wife, tell her I still couldn't pick up the kids. However, it wasn't going to be because I wasn't going to be there. It was because I've had enough and I'm going to get help this time.
So, when you were doing the recovery, tell me about what it was like going to the recovery center and what it was like trying to get detoxed.
Oh, absolutely. That was, you know, I think that was the most terrifying thing I had ever done at that point. And you would think that going to jail and doing all the other stuff and, getting in accidents because I was recklessly driving and things like that, just doing things way out of my character. And you would think that that would have woken me up, and it didn't. It was the very terrifying going to rehab. And I realized that the reason why it was so terrifying is because I knew this had to be it. I was, completely ruining relationships, and my relationship with my wife was going downhill. So many broken promises that I had made, and the apologies just weren't cutting it anymore. And getting into that rehab really shook things up for me. Within, I'd say, the first week, it was hard. And the thing about it too, you mentioned detoxing. I didn't actually detox at the rehab center. And I do not recommend this one bit ever. I actually, when I made my appointment for the rehab to check myself in, they had a bed ready, and they were like, if you need to detox right now, we can get you in right now. And I still had that little bit of me in me that said, I don't think I'm ready right now. And so I told them I did not need the bed. I said, I can wait 5 days till one opens up. And I actually detoxed on my own here, which was the worst thing that I had ever experienced. The withdrawal was so bad. And, I'm hallucinating, and I'm going through all these different stages where I'm profusely sweating and, just getting sick. And I really needed to be under medical care. I really did. And somehow I made it out. And that addiction was still in me on my way to that rehab too, where I'm like, now I'm 5 days sober, 3.5, a day and a half out of my withdrawal symptoms. Like, I'm feeling great. I'm in what they call the pink cloud syndrome of recovery, and there was still something in me that said, I don't need to do this. Maybe I don't need rehab because I feel so great right now. And, in that sober state of mind, I'm still, part of me is still in there. And it's like, no, I still need to go. Don't say a word. Just get there, and we got to get this under control. And, so when I got there about a week in, I'm starting to feel normal. I'm loving the way I'm feeling. And I get in there, and I put my nose down, and I pay attention. The counselors tell me what to do, and I do it, and that's when I knew, like, this has to be done. There's no going back at this point. And I stuck it out, and I paid attention. I did everything that I was supposed to do. And in that moment of being in rehab, asking the questions that I need to ask, and I'm like, now I want to find out what the heck is going on with me. Why was I going through this? What am I going to do now? So I'm, doing the research, and I'm reading up on it. I'm educating myself. And that was a big moment in my life. Right there was just trying to figure out who I am. And it's still a learning process. I'm 5 years sober now, a little over 5 years, and it's still a learning process. But it was the best decision I had ever made.
What was the most unexpected challenge you had faced while doing recovery?
Trying to unlearn the bad behaviors, because I had behaved like that for so long, going on 20 years. I'm basically, that is my routine. That is who I in my mind, that is who I am. So trying to unlearn all of the bad behaviors, and while also combating the triggers that are going to happen, the urges that I'm going to have, and how am I going to deal with life when life isn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows all the time. I have to face the real world. And how am I going to do that without having alcohol in my system? Because for so long, that is how I dealt with anything life threw at me. So that was a big challenge for me, especially early on. And I'm not going to lie, there are times when I still have those urges, and it's always going to be there right on my shoulder, saying, waiting for me. It's always going to wait for me to slip up so it can, slide on in and pick up where I left off. And being mindful of that is very huge. So I would say that is my biggest, that was my biggest challenge, trying to figure out who Damian is without the substance in my body.
When you were in recovery, did you ever get a chance to speak with other patrons in there that were in the recovery process? And did you get a chance to hear other people's stories to help motivate you?
Oh, absolutely. We would have our group counseling sessions, and they encouraged you to talk about it, being open and being vulnerable, and having that accountability. And accountability in recovery is so huge. I never realized that, just being able to be open about your story and tell others about your story, it not only helps others, it inspires others and lets them know that there is hope, but it also helps you in return, because now you're able, at least for me, because I was always one to hold back. I would never tell anybody when on those, multiple times that I tried to get sober before I actually did it. I would never tell anybody that I was trying, because I knew that I was setting myself up to not get sober. If I told somebody out loud that I was trying to get sober, I was trying to turn my life around, if I slipped up, now I have to explain to them, look, I screwed up, I relapsed, and I did this and did that. So I would just never tell anybody. But I learned in rehab and things like that to be vulnerable, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is the biggest thing, because now you are out there. You are showing accountability. You're showing others that, it's okay to be where we were. Our past doesn't define who we are now. As long as we are working diligently to, turn that around, we are not who we used to be.
When you were in recovery, was there a particular story that you heard that really um, has stayed with you even till now?
Yeah, I would have to say there was a counselor, and I still talk to him to this day, and his story was one of just complete. It's hard to explain. He had a story that you would look at him and be like, I can understand. Like, I could see why you would have thought that your way out was, picking up, doing your drugs, drinking alcohol, doing everything just to escape the life that you were dealt, and the trauma that you went through. And I think that sticks with me the most, because it was a story of just complete turnaround. It, and he was able to overcome every single obstacle that life would throw at him, and still be humble. So his story stuck with me a lot, and every time I would think about it, think about my recovery, I would always think about him, and to this day I still do, because he just has such an inspirational story. And I think we all do in recovery, no matter what trials and tribulations you went through, and no matter how bad you think your story is, or how your story doesn't compare to somebody else's story, you know, all of our stories have some sort of hope. And that's the biggest thing that you can take out of anybody's story in recovery.
So after you successfully completed recovery, what's the steps that what happens after recovery? Do you still have to do follow-up meetings? Do you have to do checkups with them? Or is it just a kind of a, if you have a setback, you have to go back to recovery and redo the whole process again?
So the thing about recovery is that we are never finished. It's a lifetime membership, pretty much. Um, you know, and there's always going to be a step. Like there are 12 steps, and it's not the fact that you get through the 12 steps and then you're finished, you get a, a certificate or anything like that. No, you start back over. They don't have to be done in order. And they do say that relapse is part of recovery, and it doesn't have to be, though. And if it is, if you do relapse, that doesn't mean you're a failure. And a lot of us think that, if we slip up, or we are so vulnerable that our addiction makes us pick up again, and oh, all those years or all those months or whatever it is just completely wasted. And I'm here to tell you that it's not. And relapse doesn't have to be a part of recovery. The biggest thing that you want to do is that you want to continue working on yourself. You know, my biggest thing when I first was introduced to meetings and recovery and things like that was that once I get sober, all these things just magically happen to me, and like my job gets better, or my relationships get better, and I'm able to buy a house, and all these magical things happen, and that's not the case at all. The fact that those things can happen, but you have to work at them constantly. It's a never-ending battle, and it does get easier. I'm not saying that it doesn't. It's very hard at first, and it does get easier. It's not always going to be where you're looking over your shoulder waiting for something to happen. It eventually is going to get to where you're in a routine of being sober and working on yourself. So I'd like to tell everyone that, when you start recovery, don't stop at just being sober. You want to build growth. You want to grow as a human being, as a person, and grow away from the past that used to define you.
What strategies have you found most helpful in managing cravings and or triggers?
Well, that so the cravings and the triggers and the urges and all that is going to happen. It's what you do when they happen. And so my strategies have always been to be open about them. I'm able to, if I get the urge, and I'm like, if something happens, I'm sitting on my deck, and the sun's out and it's just a perfect evening, and I start thinking, man, it would be awesome to have a drink right now. My strategy for that is to speak up about that. Don't let that linger in my thoughts, because if I start thinking like that, and I hold on to that thought, it's going to get me closer to that drink that I don't want to take. But the addiction is telling me you can handle it now. So I have a very good support system. My biggest supporter is definitely my wife. So when those things happen, I immediately bring them up to her because she knows how to not judge me when I have those thoughts. And that's the best thing that you can have in a support system is not feeling like you're judged because you speak up. So definitely surround yourself with positive people. You know, like I said before, it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows, but if you have a support system and you're able to find something positive in every single negative situation, because there is one, you can start to shift your mind and getting from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset and being able to speak up about those cravings, those urges when you have them is huge. You don't want to let them linger because your thoughts will start to, start to talk to you and tell you you can have just one. And once that happens, if you don't nip that in the bud, you could be looking at a relapse. So speaking up and having a great support system.
When you first got addicted to alcohol and had to go to recovery, did did you have any relationships that got strained during that time, and did you have a chance to rebuild them after recovery?
Oh, absolutely. I ruined quite a few relationships throughout my time, and some of them were able to be repaired, and they're not like they used to be. I'd broken a lot of trust, and nobody was able to look at me, the same. And the relationships that weren't able to be repaired was something I had to deal with. And some of them relationships, they were really close ones. And I look at it and then I'm like, it hurts. But in order for me to grow, I also have to, even if they can't forgive me, which I'm not saying that I deserve it, but I have to forgive me in order for me to move on. So, and the ones that were repaired that aren't the same anymore, I have to deal with that as well. And I look at that as, I get it. I hurt you very bad, and it's going to take forever, if at all, to get your trust back. I had to work that very hard to get my trust back with my wife, and it's not always 100% still to this day. But as long as I can show what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and that I'm working towards rebuilding myself and how I carry myself and how I carry my life, I don't have to say I'm sorry for what I did. Those were just broken, empty promises anyway, and empty, apologies. So I try to stray away from, using those words. I apologize because they used to mean nothing. But so yeah, the relationships that I had, you know, I wish everyone well, and that's all I can really do, and I'm sure the people that I did hurt, they've moved on by now, and they probably don't, uh, you know, hold any grudge, and if they do, I can't do anything about that. I have to move forward as well.
What's been the best piece of advice you've gained from this whole experience and whole journey you've taken to get clean?
The best piece of advice is that, you know, I'm not in this alone. I used to hear that all the time, and you know, the thing is when you're in that mode, when you're in active addiction, all you feel is alone. No matter how many people are around you, no matter how many people you have in your life, you could be in a room full of people and you're still gonna feel alone. And the biggest thing is that we're not alone. I remember somebody telling me that at one point, and I didn't believe it. And but now when I think about it, and I can actually say, like, this whole recovery community is huge. And if it didn't work, there wouldn't be so many people. So, that is the biggest piece of advice that I've ever gotten was when someone told me that you're not alone. And when I think about it now, I can honestly say I'm not alone, and neither is anybody else. It's a huge community, and we're all here for the same reason, and we all want to see everyone succeed.
What advice would you give someone that's hesitant to join a recovery group or support system and is scared to start the recovery stage?
That you want to be patient. Us as human beings, we want instant gratification. I I, I remember even in myself, you know, f- fresh out of rehab, only 30 days sober, and or thinking only 30 days sober, and you know, I want to be where that person is that has 10 years. I want to be past all this stuff, and so my biggest advice is take your time. There is no finish line to this thing. There's no certificate that we're going to get. So just take your time. Don't just get sober. Show up for yourself every single day, working consistently on healing the parts of you that you once held back. Build a mindset that craves growth, and that way, when you get to a certain point where you can look in the mirror and realize that you truly love the person you're looking back at again, that is huge, and you'll get there, and I can promise you that.
So being 5 years clean, 5 years sober, which I have to give you a huge congratulations on that. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
What does a fulfilling sober life look like to you now compared to before you entered recovery?
Yeah, so I'm able to do things that I never thought that I could. And when I say that, I don't mean like, extravagant things, skydiving and stuff like that. I'm talking about living my life without having to try to escape. I can sit down with my kids and I can have movie night and not pass out. The little things, and spending time with my kids outside. My youngest daughter is huge into fishing and wants to play sports, so I'm able to do those things with her, and just live. To be honest, that's it. That is what an everyday, in my life every day is just being able to live the way I want, without having to escape, doing things that I just never could do before, because my life, everything that I used to do, no matter what it was, going to my kids' concert at school, or things like that, I always had an alcoholic beverage in my system, no matter what it was. Even going to work and things like that. So being able to do those things, and take it all in, and just appreciate everything that I'm able to, witness with my kids and my job and things like that. It's so rewarding. And I could say that I wish I would have done what I did sooner, and I regret things in my past, and while I may regret some things, I look at those as defining moments that made me who I am. I don't ever want to forget who I used to be, because I know how quickly I can become that person again.
Referring to I know your kids might have questions when they get older about your recovery. What do you want them to know about this recovery stage, and what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I'm glad you bring that up actually, because I we used to shelter the kids from my active addiction, from when I would, drinking and things like that. And with the way I have to do things, and the stuff that I do outside, mentoring inmates at the local detention center, going to rehabs and speaking and things like that, I don't shelter them anymore from what I'm doing. I let them know that you can come to me with any problem, because I'm not naive enough to know that they're not going to come across something, being offered drugs or alcohol and things like that. Just trying to steer them in the direction to where, you know, this can happen. Don't think that it can't happen to you, because it can, and I tell them, I'm very open with my recovery, and, you know, with what I went through. And there are some things that I don't tell them, because it's just not appropriate. But the worst of it, I do let them know, because I want them to know that you're not immune to this either, and this can happen to you. And I want you to be open with me, and I want you to know that I'm not going to judge you no matter what you come to me with. So that has actually gone a long way with the way they communicate with me and my wife, actually. She doesn't sugarcoat anything either. And that's just the way we want it to be, because we don't want them to think that they have to hide things from us. And because we know, at least we know what they're going through. So we want them to know that no matter what you have, we're not going to get mad at you. We're not going to judge you. We just want the best for you.
Well, Damien, I've appreciated you so much for coming on. I think your story is so impactful, and just hearing your journey and recovery and being able to get be able to fight your addiction and be clean for 5 years, that's a huge accomplishment that I know a lot of people are going to be really appreciative of and be so happy to hear. Um, for anyone that wants to continue following your journey and would like to get connected with you, where all can they find you?
Sure. So on Facebook, you can find us at Breaking the Silence. That's our Facebook group. It's also the Instagram group, which is Breaking the Silence. I have a link tree that has a link to an email, my email, if you want to email me. There's a link to my book, which is also Breaking the Silence as well. And you can find that on Amazon or any online retailer, but Amazon I've noticed is the most common. But and yeah, and I'll get you that link too for the link tree. But yeah, if you want to come join our group, Facebook, Breaking the Silence, and look forward to communicating and connecting with anybody. And I appreciate you, Noah. I do. Thank you so much for having me on.
As I always do with all my guests, my listeners, I will put off his links in the description. I'll put his social media, and I'll definitely put his link tree link down there as well, so that it's easy access for you all to find, to where you don't have to go searching and browsing the internet for it, even though it might give y'all's brains a little bit of brain power. But I want to thank Damien again. A huge thank you so much for joining me. To find me on social media, Instagram and TikTok, it's Lethal Venom Podcast. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube now is Noah's Podcast. All those platforms you can find updates about when episodes are coming, and some also behind the scenes stuff, just what's going on with the show and everything. You can also find the Lethal Venom Podcast wherever you get your podcast from. It's mainly on Spotify, Apple, Amazon. iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. I mean, it's technically everywhere, wherever you get podcasts, it's there. And I've appreciated Damien so much for joining me today. Again, for people that, if you know someone that's struggling with addiction, alcohol, that needs to get help, I highly suggest you reach out to this group and get the Facebook group and everything because there's help out there for you. And I just want y'all to see that Damien's story is one of the more positive and one of the more well worth it stories that you'll hear from anyone. So I really, hopefully, this episode helps you and helps other people as well. But I appreciate everyone for listening, and hope y'all have a great rest of your day. And I will see you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.